first of all, Danny, thank you for joining me. How are you? How are things in Dubai?
All good, mate. Yeah, just obviously still working in the football industry, coaching, helping young players, whilst also sort of still in a period of deciding what I actually want to do for the next 20 years, whether that's head coaching, academy coaching, but obviously always involved in football.
I suppose then, starting with your footballing career in the youth at both Manchester United and Liverpool, what was it like being part of such a competitive environment and obviously part of the two biggest clubs in the world?
Brilliant. Yeah, obviously your football education at such a young age to be with obviously two of the biggest clubs in the country in Europe is priceless. So I did have I was fortunate to be involved with fantastic facilities and coaches from a young age. Obviously, they saw something in me to warrant that opportunity, and it was obviously a massive help for me at such a young age being involved with that type of standard.
Debut, what was that? Oh,
Sorry,
hello.
mate, I lost you there. You okay?
Yeah, that's right. No, sorry, I don't know why I done that. What's going on there? That's the second time that's done that. Yeah, just give me a shout. If you can't hear me, just give me a shout and then I'll redo the
I
question.
heard I heard debut, yeah.
Yeah, it's just going to be asking you about your debut. Your first game was in a friendly, wasn't it, against Wrexham, I believe.
Yeah, that was the first time I'd had pre-season with the first team. So I think I'd probably been about 18, and you go back to pre-season and you're sort of in and around the first team, and then the first couple of games of pre-season are always either really mixed with young players because the first team probably can only play half a game, or even some have been away on international duty. They don't join in until later on in pre-season. So that was brilliant. And then obviously from there, you're just climbing up the ladder, trying to impress every opportunity you get. And then I think later, I think later on, maybe the September, October, I think I made my full debut in one of the League Cup games against Reading.
Do you find that quite fitting that, you played against them as one of your first games and then you ended up going there later on?
Yeah, it's funny, you always find these little things in football when you look back and you think, well, I made my debut against Reading, I actually signed for them, and there's loads of little ones like that. But again, obviously making my debut for Liverpool was like the dream, and then anything after that is sort of a bonus. So you don't feel like that at the time, but if you'd have been a 10-year-old and you said you you'll play one game and it'll be your debut at Anfield, then I'd have snatched your hand off. But once you've done it, you always want a little bit more.
Did you find yourself wanting to go on at Liverpool, or are you someone that looks back and thinks like, I wish I'd done more, or I wish I had the opportunity to play more, or do you feel that you've done all you could to give yourself that opportunity?
No, I think yeah, I did everything I could. I worked as hard as I could. As you get older, you sort of learn more things, and football and sport changes and evolves in terms of, say, diet or the way you look after yourself off the field. So I wish I had that knowledge now and go back and maybe I've had more opportunities at Liverpool, but you know, I'm very happy with my career. But yeah, obviously, I would have loved to have stayed at Liverpool my whole life and played for them, my whole career.
Now, obviously, this is a podcast talking about injuries, so talk to me about that first initial injury you got, no matter how big or small, where you'd never experienced this before, where you had the issue of not being able to play.
Do you know what? I've got a really interesting relationship with injuries because when I was when I was about 11, I I was at Man United. I was training at Man United, and I really couldn't. I really went through a stage where I was struggling with a lot of pain on the inside of my knees, and I'd never experienced anything like it. And it was to the point where I was actually running. I remember it. I was running in pain, and I didn't know why, and I was really struggling. And the coaches obviously noticed, from the sideline, and I had a sort of consultation with the first team physio at the time, and it was because it was a biomechanics issue where I've got really flat feet, and my body at that point was obviously growing, and with the issue with the flat feet, my hips were not quite aligned, and then it was having an effect on my knees. And I actually, from that point on, from about 11, I wore uh, slip-in orthotics for the rest of my career, and I'd have soft ones to walk about in the day, and then no, soft ones to play in, sorry, and hard ones to walk about in the day, just to give my foot an arch, so it would take the pressure off my knees and hips. And it actually was a massive help for me. The pain went after a few weeks. It was obviously difficult to adjust to the insoles, but yeah, from that age, I wore orthotics all my career and all my life. I've only stopped wearing them since I've stopped playing because, um, I'm not in a club, so they don't obviously take care of all that for me. And then I was absolutely fine with injuries up until I think my first major injury was at Newcastle. I was about 21, and I remember it was around Christmas, and there's lots of games around the Christmas period,
Yeah.
and I was playing, and then one day in training, I just reached for a ball, and I felt a massive pop in my hamstring, and it was quite a severe one, so it was touch and go whether I needed surgery, and it was like really high grade 2, nearly a grade 3, and I went to Munich for treatment with the Bayern Munich doctor at the time, and it took about the best part of 3 months to come back, but that was my first real time of a period of where I couldn't train, couldn't play, obviously. So it was really difficult because your first one, obviously, you actually don't know the process of what you have to go through to get back, and how it can be quite lonely, quite mentally challenging. Um, but then I recovered from that. But then I got to around the age of 25, um, 26, I'd say. And I was really lucky throughout my career. I never really had big impact injuries. I never had any joint or ligament. I had a couple of ankles, but nothing major. So I was lucky in that sense, and I never needed surgery, but I really started suffering from 26 onwards with soft tissue injuries, and I really couldn't put a sustained period together where I didn't break down with a soft tissue. I think I think part of it was just my body type and the way, you know, the strain and the stress that I was putting on my body, but also my own fault as well, because I was always so desperate to get back as quickly as possible, and I never cheated in the gym, or never cheated in my therapy, but I would come back when maybe I wasn't quite ready, because I was just desperate to get back involved and worried about losing my place, or losing, not getting a new deal, or whatever it was. So you sort of come back and you sort of not lie to the physio, but you sort of say, yeah, I feel like I can train, when you really, like it's a bit of a risk. Um, so I did that my whole career, and it was silly. Even when I got a bit older, I would sort of shave a few days off and come back maybe a little bit too early. And unfortunately, it always catches up with you with tissue injuries. You might get through the first couple of days fine, but it's the accumulation of the workload through the muscle. It's just not ready. It's just not strong enough. Um, and also, what I always found, I think there was maybe one or two pre-seasons I got injured in, and missed a chunk of pre-season, and I think that's really detrimental. I think if you miss that period where everyone builds that base of fitness up, that definitely catches up with you in the season. And I think one or definitely one, maybe two pre-seasons, I missed quite a bit of it, and then I was always playing catch up throughout the season. You don't get the same um, workload done at that period with the rest of the team, and they're always ahead of you. And then you're pushing as much as you can to stay at that level during training, and then it catches up. So Yeah, I really the one part about football I hated was the injuries. Yeah, it was really difficult.
And obviously, going back to your first proper injury at Newcastle, that was done in training. Did that affect you more that it was done in a training scenario as opposed to a match? Because obviously, you've not even got to the point which every footballer works for, which is the game day. You've been injured before that.
No, I didn't really. It didn't really make a difference. I mean, because it was my first one, it was all new, and I knew it was serious straight away. Something different that I'd ever faced or felt. And yeah, it was. So the process was like obviously the first couple of days just waiting for to get assessed, and then it was obviously MRI scans, and then it was obviously said to me it was quite severe. So mentally, so that's probably December. Then you're looking at March as a rough date to get back, and then you're thinking, oh, there's only 6 weeks left after that, so that's nearly my season done. So mentally, it was a difficult one, and then obviously having to, I was really lucky. I was with a really obviously good club in Newcastle, and you get the best of the best treatment. Obviously going to Munich to see the Bayern Munich doctor and get treatment there because he was a specialist in that sort of hamstring injury. Um, whilst when you're a player, when you're at Newcastle, you're not thinking you're lucky because you've got that type of treatment at hand. It's only when you look back now you think, you know, very blessed to be able to have that type of treatment and welfare looked firsthand. So I just remember thinking um, it was tough because I couldn't do a lot for a long time. Obviously, the hamstring, I couldn't walk properly. I was on crutches for a while. Um, And then the really difficult bit, the first bit when you get back in the gym, you can start doing little exercises. It's quite exciting because you feel like, there's some progress. But then day 3, day 4, week 2, week 3 of the same uh, gym exercises, trying to strengthen, it becomes quite, boring. And then there's a little goal. You might get outside and start running, and again you think, oh yeah, no, I'm on the grass now. I must be close. And then it's week 2, week 3 on the grass, and then because you've been out so long, it's almost the last couple of weeks are like a mini pre-season because you've got to, if you're going into training, you've got to have a certain level of fitness. So there's little hills and little challenges all the time, and it's difficult. It's not easy, and you're always watching the first team players go out to train. You're watching them train out the window and you're sitting on a bed and this and that. And then even when you get outside, you're probably running and they're training. You have to go to the matches and see the atmosphere and the team win and you just don't feel part of it. You really feel like an outsider. Even, you know, the manager probably doesn't even speak to you as much because unfortunately, if you're not available to him, you're no use to him most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my next question is, were you someone that was okay with being involved in everything, or were you someone that was on the sideline and hated every minute of it? Because I get a different perspective from different people where some are wanting to be involved, some like the competition of seeing that they are pretty much useless and they have to get back to match the other people. But a lot of people say it's probably the worst part is when you're fit enough to be at the grounds or at games where you're seeing the football matches take place or you're seeing training takes place, it's the hardest thing in the world to watch people and ultimately people playing in your position as well.
Listen, anyone who says that it doesn't affect them or it's not an issue for them, I find that hard to believe because, you know, it, there's a bit of jealousy if, you can't be involved in something and you're watching your team or your teammates, go and win a big game and the fans celebrating and you've not contributed to that. That's really difficult. And then even worse is, whoever's come into your position because of your injury and, they're flying and playing well. That's difficult because you're looking at it thinking, even when I get fit, how am I going to get back in? Or you know what I mean? So it's a tough one, and mentally, it's a real difficult challenge. Not only trying to get fit and get back to train and etc. It's watching someone in your position excel, which is tough.
Here's a question then. So, have you ever had a time in your career where you've been out injured, and not only is the person that's now replaced you in your position playing well, but they're also more than just a teammate. They're a really good friend, for example. Have you ever had that situation?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. And it's a real strange position to be in, and it's I don't know, might be just unique to football, but I can be really good friends with the lad in my position, and ultimately, you always want the team to win, but you've got to be half thinking, well, I hope he doesn't play that well, because if I want him to play that well, I'm never going to get a game myself. Obviously, you can once you're fit, you can take it into your own hands, sort of when you're in training, and just be better than him. But if you're sitting there watching a game, even if you're on the bench, you're thinking, "Oh, he's my mate, but I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't, score or do or have the best game. Else, I'm going to be sitting here all night." So it's a weird one, yeah. But ultimately, he's your mate as well. So you never wish anything bad, but you are thinking, don't mind if you have a stinker here, so I can get on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the mindset of I want my mate to do well because morally, you're a good person, but you also your job is to play in that position where he is. So I can imagine
You
that
have
is
to.
such a
It's the
conflicting.
most it's the most selfish team sport in the world, and that's just the way it is.
I suppose seeing it on the touchline, obviously some people don't mind being involved, but obviously as you've said, you've found it really hard to see the other players playing. Did you find it helpful then the people that you had around you? So for example, the physio, because obviously you build quite a big connection with the physio when you're out injured.
Yeah, some of the best relationships you have in the training ground are with the physios or the medical department, because even when you're fit, you find that sort of the hub where everyone gathers, and that's where most of the banter is, and it's a little bit more relaxed in there because you're not talking to any of the coaching staff that are sort of deciding on teams, and you can't have the same relationship with them as you would with the physios. So I think the medical department is arguably one of the most important aspects of a football club, because obviously they've got to keep players fit and get players fit, and make big calls on injuries, etc. But also from the player's point of view, in terms of mentality and keeping the spirits high, good times or bad times, the medical department's always where people feel a lot more relaxed. And then from a personal point of view, when if you're injured and you spend in you know anything up to, if people have ACLs, etc., you're 6 to 9 months with the same guy each day. You do build up a relationship, and you're spending a lot of time, and your career's in his hands, really.
What's that like then, because you've got to put so much trust in that physio because as you say, although you could sort of bend it a little bit and try and get a few days here, a few days there forward, if the physio sees something he doesn't like, he's not gonna lie about it or not tell the manager because ultimately, if you then get injured again, it falls back on him. So he's also
Mm.
got to protect himself in that sense.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. It's a really difficult job because the manager will always be putting pressure on the physio to get players back as quickly as possible. But then again, if he does that and there's a reoccurrence, it's on him. So that's a difficult thing for him to balance. With the players, look, even myself, you're really close. You get really close and you work with them, but also they have to deal with your frustration, and you will moan at them because it's repetitive every day and it's boring, and you'll moan and this and that, and they have to balance that as well. Um, so yeah, like I said, it's one of the most crucial departments in football, and um, how they deal with a manager wanting to get players back, how they deal with miserable players who they've got for a long period of time. Really tough balancing act, I think, for them.
And obviously, you've been in various different teams, just spoke about in the intro. You've been abroad as well, but talk to me about the treatment you had because obviously you played for three big clubs in the youth as well. You played for United, you played for Liverpool and Newcastle. what was the facility likes in all three of those places? Because instantly I'm thinking they're the best of the best. You can't really get much better.
Yeah, the difference is obviously the quality of obviously who they employ, but the size of the team they have. So, um, yeah, you'll have a head of department, which obviously I think most times will be a doctor, and then you have head physio and maybe three, four, five physios underneath dealing with first team and 23s or reserves, masseurs. You can have three or four of them. So the medical department becomes very, very big. And then you think S&C is sort of linked to medical and have a relationship where they hand over to each other. So the difference is just the size of the teams, and then as a obviously, um, yeah, even like Blackburn had a massive medical department. Fulham was arguably the best I'd seen in terms of what they had. They were really thorough and had a huge team and really good people there. And then staying with England, we went when I was at Warsaw later on in my career. Um, Medical department was tiny. You had one physio, maybe an intern come in and help on masseur for the massages or match days, and just the department was really small compared to obviously the big teams. Abroad, very similar, smaller medical department, smaller team. So it's only when you see that you think, wow, like that, you are really blessed to be involved at that level.
So why was it then that Fulham was arguably the best? Obviously, I know you talk about the personal quality, but why did you feel that that was a step above the rest almost?
I just felt their detail of not only when you're injured, but injury prevention and what you would do in the mornings and what you would the sort of how many people there were to see. So you can obviously you can they can turn up and 20 players need treatment in the morning or 20 players need a massage in the morning. Um, and they were really good at organizing and making sure they had enough people to deal with every player if they wanted something in the morning. And then just their injury prevention was fantastic, I thought. And yeah, I was really impressed with what they had, and the people that were there had been at really high levels or have gone on to really good things. So Fulham was impressive. Yeah, and I was only there a short period, so it was of the standard of a Premier League club.
And obviously, like you look back on your career, you've been part of whatever sort of league they've been in, whether they've been lower than when maybe where they should be, or you've been in the youth for the teams, but you've been part of some quite big teams, like in England. Like you've had quite a good career in terms of going to these different teams and getting these different experiences. Do you think that helped you being part of such big clubs, maybe going down to the smaller clubs that you went to as well with your injuries, but also just on a personal development level?
Yeah, probably because being injured at them clubs, at the bigger clubs, you sort of once you've had three, four injuries and it's a similar injury to what you've had before, you can almost look after yourself. Obviously, in terms of like soft tissue work that you need doing, obviously you need an expert to do that. But then once it comes to the gym work or back on the grass, you could almost do it yourself because you've been there a few times and you know your body better than anyone, so you know where you are and where you're at if you're honest with yourself. Um, so yeah, there was just you get that experience with injuries where you sort of you'll do something, you'll feel something like a cough and you'll go, yeah, I've had that before. That's probably a 2 to 3 week, or you'll get something more severe and you think, oh, you wake up the next day and think, oh yeah, that might be a longer one. So yeah, definitely the experience and just the knowledge really.
And what was that like as well, going from clubs with such big facilities and huge teams to the teams that maybe didn't have? Did you ever sort of sit there at a lower down team, you're injured and think like, oh, I did used to have this. Did that ever frustrate you, or did you just deal with what you had in front of you?
Nah, didn't bother me. You deal with what you're working with, mate. And yeah, even when I went to Warsaw, the physio was a good lad, and I had a couple of injuries there, but I sort of just looked after myself. I just needed him to assess it, soft tissue when I needed, but he'd just give me my program and I could just crack on with it. It wasn't like I was a young player who didn't know the process and he needed to be really hands on. Um, as long as the gym had what one I needed, and when I felt strong enough, I'd say, look, I think we can go outside now. And yeah, you just deal with what you're working with. It's no problem.
So I guess one of the big questions for me personally, I want to ask. I get a few questions sent in from people that they'd like to ask, but one of the big ones for me is when I was in hospital and I had my issues, I found it so hard to get up, like just that first initial get up out of bed feeling when I was at my lowest mentally and physically. Can you talk to me a bit about how you managed to get yourself out of it? Because I can imagine that, you know, doing it as a job, I can't even begin to imagine how that must feel knowing that you literally can't do your job because you are injured. So how did you get yourself out of bed, really? How that's the question.
Um, well, you have to, because obviously it's your job, um, and there is punishments if you don't, you don't get to work and you're not there on time. Um, it's difficult to go there, and I think what helps is getting into the football club or getting into the changing room, and obviously it's a good environment, and then the physio room's always a good environment. The difficult bit is when the players go out to train, and then you've got to crack on in the gym or get ready to go outside with the physio. But you in professional football, it moves so quick, and if you don't get yourself right, you don't get ready, you don't get back fit, you get left behind very quickly, and someone takes your place. And if someone does well for the whole period you're out, um, the longer it goes, the more trust the manager has in that player. Then it, makes it difficult for you to get back in the team. You might be running out of contract, so you've got to get playing, else you get to the end of the season and you're out of contract and you've been injured, which is a footballer's worst nightmare. And then other things, that you have a family that depend on you. You have children. So as difficult as it is mentally, uh, yeah, you've got to. There's no other choice. And there's some really difficult moments, and I think um, I think obviously having children or a wife, or people who still live at home, family is massively important. But yeah, the personal side of it, where you've got to get back fit, you've got to get playing, else eventually you're not going to have a contract or a place to come back to. So that's the driving force.
And is there anybody both socially and as part of a football club where you straight away come to your mind and think, yeah, they helped me the most, or not necessarily the most, but they stick out as someone that really helped you when you were going through your difficult times?
I just, do you know what? Wherever I was, I must say, um, whether it was Newcastle, Blackburn, Reading, where I was having injuries, the medical team were always brilliant in terms of the morale and being able to, you've got a player who ultimately is really down, or players that are really down, they're injured, they can't, what like we've discussed, but they're brilliant at, you know, making the environment fun or laughable, and then switching it, right, we've got to go to work now. And one conversation I always remember when I did my first one at Newcastle, and I was probably halfway through the rehab. And like I said, it was at Christmas time, and it was coming to the end of January, which is the end of the transfer window. And I remember the doctor saying to me, I don't know if I was moaning about something, and the doctor said to me, "Look, I'll be honest with you, right? If you don't get this right, and they don't see you coming back before the end of the season, in the last couple of days of the window, they're going to go and sign another midfielder in your place and spend like good money on him, and that could be you finished at the club." So that's how serious it is that you do this properly and get right. And that never left me. Where I never, you're replaceable at all moments in football, and especially in a transfer window where the manager and the club are having conversations with the physio saying, "Do you think we can get him back on X date? If not, we're going to go and sign a midfielder this week in his place." And luckily the doctor said, "No, we'll get him back. We need X amount of weeks. You don't need to go and spend a few million on a player. We'll get him back fit." And that was like, oh wow, like literally because of an injury, they're willing to go and pay a few million on a player to come in, and that might be me, that might be me done. So that's the sort of pressures you're under.
So I guess you dealt with that in a way because some people might fold with that, but you obviously dealt with that as no, well, I'm almost being given a chance here. I'm being given sort of a head start in terms of this is what they want to do, but this is what I have to do to make sure they don't do that.
Yeah, it was. You listen. You always want honesty, and the doctor was brilliant because I think I was having a moan about the same stuff I had to do, and he just laid it on the line and said, "Look, this is the situation, mate. Like, you know, if they're willing to go and spend millions, and if they pay that sort of money for a player who's going to play, you're going to find it difficult to get back in. So you need to get yourself fit as soon as possible. And the only way to do it is to do A, B, and C. And if you're going to moan and not do it, then I'm going to have to tell them that, it's probably worth going to sign a player because my ass is on the line if I say you're coming back and then you're not back in time or you break down when you get back, it's going to be me in the on the chopping block. So, that really put everything into perspective for me. And I thought, football, you're replaceable and it moves very quickly.
Now, obviously, you played as we spoke about at some really big clubs in England, but you also played abroad. Talk to me about your time over there and sort of why you chose to do that. Because a lot of English players don't want to play abroad; they want to stay in the English football division.
Yeah, I'd always wanted to. It was always an ambition of mine. It was just that when and how it would come about. Um, I'd come to the end of my contract at Blackburn and I was 32. Um, and Blackburn had offered me a new 2-year deal, which would probably take me to 34. And then thinking at 34 might be too late to get another opportunity to go abroad. Teams in Asia had reached out, teams in America, and as it happened, obviously, I turned down the deal at Blackburn and chose to take that opportunity abroad because, obviously, with my age, but also my children were young at that time, and they were able to, wouldn't mess up with their school, etc. So, yeah, I took the opportunity and absolutely loved it, mate. It was brilliant. It's a fantastic experience, brilliant for the family, and in terms of me, it opened my eyes where football is a massive, massive, massive industry. Like you said, in England and English players, we live in a bubble where we only think about the Premier League or even the top 5 leagues in Europe, and you think everything else outside is there's no in. When I went to Asia, they are football nuts and stadiums 50,000 full every week, 2 hours before. Um, it's a real massive industry. And I advise young players now because everyone you speak to, even here, we help players on their journeys. They only want to go to Europe. I only want to play in Europe. Anyone, and I say, I went to Asia and there's absolute superstars over there that you've never heard of. They're millions of followers on social media. They earn fantastic money. They've got a beautiful life. They're all over the malls. They're sponsored by everyone, and no one's ever heard of them in Europe. And you think, how can you not want a bit of that? Because getting to Europe or the England is like, it's 0.1%. You can go out there and forge a career and be a superstar somewhere. And it's just, yeah, and I didn't know that until I was 32, 33. So trying to pass that on to other players to look elsewhere is what I'm passionate about.
One question then from that. Do you regret, I'll change the question. Do you wish that you played more outside of England than you did, or are you happy with how long you spent out abroad?
No, listen. I'm really, really happy. And look, Europe is the best, and the Premier League is the best. There's no doubt about that. But if I'm 17, 18, and I'm not already there, or I'm not in an academy or a reserve team with the opportunity to do that, you know, the chances are very, very slim. And then, players who want to go to Europe, and I get it, the journey, there is examples of, going through Eastern Europe to Scandinavia and finding your way. But again, very, very difficult. And, them first few years is really tough. And we've had boys go on that journey where they go to Eastern Europe, or maybe Scandinavia, but it's still a big, big risk for me for them, where they don't even look, they don't even consider, that maybe Asia or different parts of the world have a route and a pathway where you can have a great career, you can earn good money, you can have a good life. It's not even a consideration for these boys. And I was fortunate because I grew up in good systems and I worked my way through and I was good enough to go and play at the highest level. But that's not the case for everyone, where, just to say I play in Europe, they might earn a small amount to be in Eastern Europe somewhere where they can earn much more in Asia, and, the standard of life and the competitions they're involved in are much more meaningful. So it's just an education really for people.
So I guess, I've really enjoyed this pod. So first of all, thank you for giving up your time. But I guess I want to sort of finish on a couple of questions. One being, what's your advice for people who suffer injuries both in professional football and outside of it, like myself? You go all the way down to grassroots and then go a little bit further to where my footballing level was a bit lower than that. Um, and you get injuries throughout all of it. What's your advice for those people in the different areas in the sport?
I think at professional level, I think be really, really meticulous in your rehab. Um, Make sure you come back absolutely 100% ready to go, because you will break down. And once you do experience an injury, I think that's the only point where people take prehab seriously. So obviously doing the work before training, etc. It's so crucial and so important, and all your strengthening work. Unfortunately, for most people, some people can get away with it their whole life. They've just got bodies that that can withstand it. But once you've had an injury, it's only then you learn, wow, prehab's really important. My strengthening work, my gym work's really important. Um, I think at grassroots and stuff like that, my only advice is, and even for me now as a coach, sometimes you sometimes you join in training, or you feel the urge to go and play. But as much as we love football or we love the sport, if you're going to have an injury that affects your work or stops you working, I think you have to weigh up the balance of that, because I've seen coaches who have good jobs, they get injured for a long time by joining in or playing on the weekend, and then they can't work. So I think that's always a really tricky one for me.
And my sort of final question is, how are things for you over in Dubai? How are you doing over there in terms of your career outside of football and that transition out of sport or football?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and it's obviously I love living here. The Middle East is beautiful, great place to live, and the football in the Middle East, as everyone knows, particularly with Saudi, etc. Football's booming here. There's loads of opportunities, loads of good networking opportunities. Um, we do a couple of things out here where we obviously coach and develop young players in team environments or small groups, one-to-ones. We also go on tours around the world, particularly Africa, finding opportunities for boys to get them in professional deals. And oh, it's brilliant. I've had a few. I've done a few things. I've been a head coach in Dubai as well with a first team. So I'm trying all different things to find out where my path lies. I will keep traveling. if I see an opportunity somewhere else in the world, I definitely will take it. I don't see myself staying in one area for the rest of my life. I do enjoy traveling. At the moment, no real ambition to go back home and go through the process of trying to be a manager there. I think it's quite saturated, and there's probably thousands of coaches better than me. So I'm sort of enjoying what I'm doing, but always open to opportunities. I'm quite flexible.
And what were you like with that transition as sort of coming out of professional football, which you've that's pretty much been your life, to all of a sudden not doing that?
I find it easy because the last year of my career, mentally, I was probably mentally I was done, because I started training obviously had become difficult because of my age, and I was balancing that. But it was when it didn't really matter if I was a sub or played or come on for half an hour. That fight to be in the team had sort of left me a little bit. And I'd always been someone who was, I'd knock on the manager's door if I didn't play and I felt I should, but I was sort of content with being on the bench. So I knew I was done. Um, and sort of the love for the football. I didn't, I just wasn't really watching it on the TV, but then obviously started coaching, got an opportunity, and fell back in love and found a passion again, and enjoyed watching football and analysing and teaching and helping. So it's been brilliant for me because it's brought my love and energy back for the game.
And you obviously have a different perspective on injuries as well, maybe, don't you? Because you're on the different end of the scale for that.
Exactly, yeah, and dealing with players who maybe their workload or their training, or when they do get injured, how to sort of comfort them, or help them or advise them. You know, it's my responsibility now to pass on that knowledge that I've had. So it's a natural progression.